Dragon Ball Z is arguably the single most influential anime of all time. For any Western anime fan over 20, it was almost certainly one of their first exposures to the medium, or at least one of the first that wasn't edited beyond recognition, and it's one of the few anime to become a mainstream cultural landmark in the West. It was directly responsible for turning Funimation into the dubbing powerhouse we know today. It pushed Akira Toriyama to the forefront of the manga industry, and it inspired countless shonen action series that followed it. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about any of that today. Did you see the title of this video? Instead, I'm going to be looking at Chala Head Chala, the Dragon Ball Z opening theme, and the way it has helped to shape an era of shonen OPs. Make no mistake, this is a great OP, but it's not as deep or interesting on its own as some of the other stuff I've covered here. What makes it really special is how it's codified a formula of sorts for OPs of shonen martial arts series, just as Dragon Ball itself did much to define that genre. It's also interesting for how it contrasts with Rock the Dragon, the series' famous English opening, but we'll get to that later. Anime of this era spent lots of time showing off their titles, a trend that's happily gone the way of the dodo in recent years, and Dragon Ball Z treats us to almost 10 straight seconds of its title flying over an ocean before breaking into the action. These flying scenes are, of course, meant to make you feel like you're flying through the sky like Goku. The original Dragon Ball opening had a few shots like this to echo the flying Nimbus, but in DBZ flying was so prominent that Toei needed to place an emphasis on it. Animating stuff like this was not cheap back in the 80s. Nowadays, rolling shots like this are pretty easy to create with CG backgrounds, but the team at Toei had to draw every frame of this rolling water, and later these mountains, by hand. If the sensation of flying weren't so vital to the show, it wouldn't have been made at all. And yet, think of how many shows you've seen since Dragon Ball Z where the title fades out of or into a soaring shot of the sky, to the point where it's become a cliche. Even with shows that have next to nothing to do with flying, they find a way to work it in, not for the purpose of making you feel like you're flying, but to make you think, ooh, this show might be like Dragon Ball. The flying shot has become an anime shorthand for evoking a sense of adventure, and it certainly does that job here. The first character we see is Goku. As we pull away from his typical look of cheerful determination, we see he's got a stowaway, his son, Gohan, who he hoists up on his shoulder as they fly off toward adventure. In addition to being super adorable, this introduction tells us, by and large, what the DBZ story arc is all about. Goku passing the torch on to his kid. At least, that's what it was about until the Buu saga. Most of the OP actually focuses on Gohan rather than Goku, as he grows from being supported by his dad to becoming more independent. After a highly impressive flying sequence where they soar up past the collected Dragon Balls, we see Gohan running on his own along Shenron's back, and we're introduced to the rest of the cast. The Z Warriors all soar past Gohan one after another, except Yajirobe because he's Yajirobe. The order in which the characters pass Gohan roughly equates to their power levels at the start of the series. First Yamcha, then Krillin, then Tien, and finally Chaozu. Gohan's reaction tells us he wants to catch up to them. This next shot of a glacier is obviously meant to allude to the show's pacing. Kidding, but it does have to do with time. The crumbling glacier evokes a sense of patience and gradual erosion. It's always match cut with a villain like Dr. Gero or the Saiyans, giving us an idea of the steady build-up to their arrival. Interestingly, while the OP stays largely the same throughout the first 200 episodes of the series, small changes are made to reflect what's going on in the various story arcs. First, Vegeta and Nappa stride forward menacingly against a wall of flame, then Dr. Gero appears out of the darkness with an android in tow. The very first OP features the Nimbus flying against the same fiery background, but this seems more like a placeholder graphic than a deliberate artistic choice, since the only differences from the Saiyan version are a lack of Vegeta's face in the ship speeding towards Earth and a total absence of the scene where Gohan runs on Shenron with Tekron. A brief shot shows Gohan being chased by a dinosaur, referencing his training with Piccolo, and in a literal flash we jump to the Saiyan ships approaching and descending slowly through the Earth's atmosphere. In an interesting fake-out, the impact is swapped for a zoom-in on a blood-red moon and a burst of energy as Gohan transforms into an Ozaru and goes on a midnight rampage, mirroring his transformation during Piccolo's training. Piccolo reacts to something, and in an instant he's standing in front of us as energy pours out around him. This is the moment of his sacrifice when Nappa is about to kill Gohan, although the particulars of the framing and lighting also call to mind scenes from Close Encounters of the Third Kind, perhaps alluding to his alien origins. In a less than tasteful cut, we jump to the series' comedy relief, although in fairness, Hironobu Kageyama was singing about chess at the time, and this isn't the only anime to do this, and we zoom out quickly to see Bulma, Puar, Oolong, Master Roshi, Turtle, and Gohan running from the same dinosaur, a funny little moment that lends a bit of levity before the action-heavy climax. In the first version of the OP, we see Krillin, Tien, and Yamcha launching energy attacks. For the Android saga, they're replaced by Vegeta going Super Saiyan and Trunks killing Frieza, which makes sense since they end up being far more important supporting characters during that arc. Following that in both versions, Goku throws his hands to the sky in a moment of desperation and begins charging his spirit bomb. We cut to Gohan running alone along a mountain range as Shenron crests through the clouds behind him. This is another shot that's been aped time and again in series that followed, and with good reason since it's breathtaking. This is the moment where the Z-Warriors wish Goku back, and Gohan is running along excitedly to meet his dad. In the next shot we see that happen. A more grown and battle-ready Gohan somersaults out of the sky and his father catches him, flying with him on his shoulders once again. Which is especially touching when you consider that this is the first time since the beginning of the OP that father and son are framed together. But of course, after their touching reunion, the Saiyans land, smashing the earth below them, and the Z-Warriors line up for a final pose. In the first version of the OP, we see the cast of Dragon Ball, whereas by the Android Saga, reformed villains Piccolo and Vegeta have joined the team along with Trunks. For both, Goku drops in last, armed with his Nyoi Bow in the original and a Super Saiyan transformation in the second version, and the OP concludes. Strong, but like I said, kind of standard. Then again, that's because it set the standard. I've already brought up a few obvious points of comparison between this and other OPs, like a few nearly identical shots, but the biggest impact Chala Head Chala made on the anime industry is in structure. In nearly every previous shonen series I've looked at, even ones with big ensemble casts like Saint Seiya, emphasis in the OP was placed on the protagonist. Following Dragon Ball Z, that started to change. Early imitators like Yu Yu Hakusho turned the structure into a formula. You start with a shot of your main character and his most important companions, then you get some shots of them acting as a team, and then you throw in a few solo moments showing off their individual strengths, mixed with shots of the main villains before ending on a big group shot of the whole cast. I realize that sounds kind of simple, and it's not always exactly in that order, but those elements show up in pretty much every shonen OP these days, and prior to Dragon Ball Z, and to a lesser extent Dragon Ball, they didn't. Modern OPs don't just carry the DNA of Dragon Ball Z, in fact, Evangelion might be even more influential, but we'll get to that when we get to it. I don't normally talk about the actual songs in these videos because I don't speak Japanese and I'm not a music critic, but Chala Head Chala was also part of a trend toward more original theme songs for series. A lot of early anime had catchy jingles that repeated their titles a heck of a lot, whereas now it's more or less expected for a hit anime to produce a hit single. Chala Head Chala wasn't the first such song in anime, but it was an iconic hit. It's been parodied and covered by artists the world over, and it earned its creator Hironobu Kageyama the nickname Mr. DBZ, which you'd think would be Akira Toriyama. But then we weren't really exposed to that stateside. Instead we got, well, a catchy tune that repeats the title over and over again, although Rock the Dragon was a lot heavier than something like Mystical Adventure. Whereas DBZ's Japanese theme contains moments of comedy, Rock the Dragon is all fighting all the time. Instead of crumbling glaciers, we have tearing airplanes and non-stop explosions, cut together from the show and movies with little regard for representing the actual content of the series. It's a gross misrepresentation of what Dragon Ball is about, and yet we love it. Rock the Dragon is routinely praised as one of the great theme songs by anime fans, and having grown up with it, I find it hard to argue. It sticks in your head and gets you hooked like a good theme song should, and it sells the parts of the series that most appeal to American boys. But it doesn't have the same cinematic flair as Chala Head Chala, nor was it nearly as influential. Good as what we got was, it's hard not to feel like we missed out. What you definitely shouldn't miss out on are the other videos on this channel. I'm very proud of last episode's Spice and Wolf breakdown, along with my recap of the Spring 2015 season, so please check those out if you haven't seen them yet. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and look forward to the next episode of What's in an OP, where I'll be dissecting the intro for one of my all-time favorite shows, Anohana. This is Jeff Thu, professional shitbag, signing out from his mother's basement. Now play us out, Konata.